Good morning, everybody, from the Seabourn Venture, and we are headed for our first stop in Antarctica. We're about 68 degrees south of the equator, and as you can see, dodging a few icebergs on the way in. So stay tuned, see what we find today.
As I said in the last episode, it was a pretty exciting night when we went to bed the night before crossing over the Antarctic Circle. So when I was laying in bed and heard a little bit of metallic clinking against the hull, I got pretty excited, threw open the windows, and voila, icebergs were out in front of us. So I decided it must be time to get up. Well, with the sun being what it is in the Antarctic, it was all of 5:30 a.m., so not even time to have coffee quite yet. So I decided to let Donna Doobie sleep in a little bit. I got dressed and wandered the decks, just taking in all of the sights as we made our way towards Red Rock Ridge on this spectacular morning. So as we gaze out at the ice, it's a good time to talk about how the groups work for excursions or expedition times on the Seabourn Venture. When you're on board, you'll be split up into 6 different colored groups. We were in the red group. And these groups are generally assigned 2 to a time slot. So let's say on this morning we have an 8:45 expedition for the green and yellow group. 9:45 would be orange and brown, and 10:45 would be red and blue. The groups are split up to about 40 per color group, and there is a regulation for landings in Antarctica, which is there can be no more than 100 cruise ship passengers getting off the boat and onto shore at any given time. So in general, you have anywhere from an hour to 90 minutes when we have shore landings to explore before you have to wander back to the ship and make room for the next group. And every single day, your group will be departing at a different time, so that no one group is always earlier or always late or always in the middle of the embarkation process. So they keep it as fair as possible, all, of course, being dependent on weather conditions, how many days we'll actually have on the ice, etc. What we did discover later in the trip, though, is if you're in an early group, there's a little less time pressure on you to leave your shore landing and return to the ship, as there's plenty of guests who want to get off the ship, go get a couple of pictures, and then get back to the ship as soon as possible. So breakfast opened this morning at 7 a.m., and we had our breakfast with a beautiful view of icebergs passing by when the ship started to slow and the announcement came in.
In the next 10 to 15 minutes time, we are experiencing.
Here we are at our first, hopefully, landing site, Red Rock Ridge. About 68 degrees, 16 minutes south latitude. And there's our exploration team, make sure it's going to be safe for us to land.
Prior to any guests going ashore, a safety team from Seabourn will go ashore and find the appropriate spot for a landing site. A note on Red Rock Ridge is currently the farthest south any passenger ship is allowed to conduct landings in Antarctica. Some ships can go a little bit further south before the ice sets in March and April, but they are restricted to cruise only and Zodiac tours. With still a couple more hours to go before our time, we spent our time watching this chinstrap penguin hunt around the bow of the Seabourn Venture. It was interesting to be able to hear the single penguins out honking as they would rise up out of the water looking for their friends, or maybe letting them know where a good hunting spot was. The expedition team was a flurry of activity this morning, preparing kayaks, getting submarines ready to go out for the morning runs, and of course, starting to make a safe landing site at Red Rock Ridge for the first groups who were just about to depart. One of the coolest noises from the bow of the ship, though, were these noises of almost shotgun or explosion blasts. That's the sound in the distance as giant chunks of ice crack off of glaciers and plummet into the sea.
There goes the first group.
So after all this time flying to South America, flying to Ushuaia, crossing the Drake Passage, it was finally our time to head to the Antarctic Peninsula. Okay, now let's see if you could tell when the first penguin sightings happened with the ladies on board.
We are officially standing on the continent of Antarctica.
Honestly, it's a little tough to even contain your emotions of landing in this world where people have never settled. It's something you almost can't describe. You have to just be there and experience the magnificence of a place so hostile that the only creatures that can survive here are marine mammals, marine birds, such as the penguins, a few lichen, and one single insect. So it's amazingly inhospitable, but incredibly gorgeous. So from the landing spot, it was about 1 kilometer or 0.6 of a mile walk through rocks and some slushy snow in order to get to the penguin colony. And these are Adélie penguins. One of the most endearing behaviors of the Adélie penguins are when they meet a friend or their mate when they come back from fishing, they celebrate by pointing directly to the sky and flapping their wings. We call this the Snoopy dance, I think is the official term. Oh. We learned too that penguins are very multimodal, whether it's sliding on your belly or hopping up and down rocks or running and walking over the rocks. They get along pretty well, but it does get exhausting.
Hang out here a little while longer.
You just can't resist having an inner monologue as we watch these entertaining animals.
Oh, I don't know if I'm so sure about you. Oh, yeah. Fred, little buddy.
As we learned in Buenos Aires, it takes two to tango. Adélie penguins this far south tend to come ashore in that October to November time frame, and they usually lay 2 eggs. And those 2 eggs hatch in December. So by the time we saw these guys in the second week of January, they were pretty good sized. But not so much sized that the skua wasn't right there looking for any opportunity to take advantage of a young penguin.
But there's 2 of them. See, there's one right here.
Yeah. Right, because this is the end of the breeding.
Penguin parents very diligently take turns parenting, with one always, or almost always, guarding the young chick or the nest, and the other out getting food and hunting. And then they switch up, with every return, of course, ending in the Snoopy dance. How can you tell which parent just came in from hunting? Well, they're the ones not covered in guano. Due to concern about avian influenza, we were encouraged to always stay at least 5 meters, so 15 feet away from the birds to try and reduce any chance of transmission. And even if and when, of course, the penguins approached us, we were encouraged to slowly move away if safe to do so, to always keep the animals as safe as possible. There have been a few outbreaks in Antarctica and penguin colonies and other colonies of seabirds of the avian influenza, and so far the impact, while devastating in single colonies, has been very, very limited. Researchers suspect that the influenza may be carried by migrating birds, but taking additional precautions for travelers to the area is just common sense. So let's talk a little bit about accessibility. So Red Rock Ridge would be, I would say, one of the easiest landing sites we landed at, as it was fairly flat from a perspective of elevation gain. However, there was still a significant stretch of ice and snow that had to be crossed, and the rocks that you had to pass over on your way to the ice and snow trail over to the penguins were extremely uneven, and if you weren't sure of your footing, it was going to be a challenge. While walking sticks can help, it became really apparent that guests with limited mobility were really not going to get as much out of the trip as they probably would wish they'd had.
All coming in from fishing. You know, you guys could have swam further down the beach. I mean,
so we really felt lucky being able to land this morning at Red Rock Ridge. This is a site where only a few landings are made per season. Last season, I think 16 total landings were made in Red Rock Ridge. So we were lucky to get to experience this spot. With the fishing party bidding us adieu, it was time to head back to the ship and make the short cruise to our next destination. But first, we needed to fuel up, so a little bit of fish and fries was the perfect call before our next call down to join the Zodiacs. I do have to commend the Seabourn Expedition team. From the time the captain starts slowing down the ship to the time in which the Zodiacs are readied is usually about 15 minutes or so. The expedition team gives us a 10-minute warning before we need to be dressed and downstairs in the landing zone. The landing zone is a mud room and decontamination room where we store our boots. And there are actually two mud rooms, one on each side of the ship, so that our lockers are split up, with even cabins on one side and odd on the other.
oh, look how blue that water is. That's beautiful.
I tell you, the nice thing about the expeditions as well is if any of the guests or the drivers see something interesting as we're going into shore, the expedition leader who's driving the Zodiac can drive us over to take a look. So in this case, we had spotted a crab-eater seal on the ice and wanted to go get a closer look on our way into Stonington Island. Now, crab eaters are the most abundant seal in the world, so don't worry, we'll talk more about them.
You know that the ice is not blue, it just looks blue, right?
The light or is it the reflection?
It's the light, so it's very old ice.
Okay, we're here at Stonington Island, home of both a old British and U.S. base for exploration and research. Just a wonderful little bay, a little bit tricky with the deep snow, but we're getting there. Comes Donna Doobie.
So it's interesting, Stonington Island being so small, but with two research bases. The first base we come across is the British base, or Base E, which was originally established in 1946, closed in 1950, but then reopened in 1960. And the structure that we're in right now was actually erected in 1961. Ultimately, the base was closed down in 1975. And believe it or not, we were told, don't eat anything in the kitchen. Down the slope towards the glaciers, we saw a Weddell seal. There was a small hill just past the British base E, which afforded great views of the Northeast Glacier. And we kept hearing it crack and pop in the distance.
Oh. Wow. I did not have camera ready. Oh, wow. Look at the ocean.
Here comes the tidal wave.
Yeah. Wow.
Oh! Quick, rush down to the beach. Look at it rolling.
Somebody in that group might have had a picture. Oh my gosh.
Oh, look at the size of that iceberg. It's left.
The trek over to the American base, or the original East base, was a little tricky, just on account of a very, very narrow path of tamped down snow. And if you got off that narrow path, the deep snow could envelop your entire leg and lead to a twisted knee or worse. Now, the East Base was originally founded during the United States Antarctic Service Expedition, led by, of all people, Richard Byrd. And that expedition was from 1939 to 41. Subsequently, the Rana Antarctic Research Expedition, which ran from 1947 to 1948, utilized the building. And that expedition included two women, Edith Rana and her friend Jenny Darlington, and they were the first two women to overwinter in Antarctica.
Well, you never know where you need a spare airplane motor.
We couldn't go in this building, but had me wonder if I needed a seal carcass storage shed at home. Now, on our trek back to the Zodiacs, we ran into 4 Adélie penguins that I nicknamed the Fab Four. So I'll let you figure out which one's John, George, Ringo, and Paul. But they were fascinating, but also a little disruptive, as due to the distance rules we were following in Antarctica, we couldn't cross their paths. So we just spent time watching these 4 guys, and they were just so much fun, so amazing. So it must be some sort of penguin code, but they tend to go out in groups of 4, we saw, on several different species and several different locations. Anyhow, these ones were headed off for the hunt.
Oh my.
Those tracks.
Yeah.
Fresh penguin tracks. Belly tracks.
Wow.
So being in the late group, it's a pretty quick turnaround to get back, take a quick shower, go to the evening briefing, and then off to dinner. Tonight was the duck spring roll, which was very special, and it was Saturday night. So had a nice big steak. And after dinner, just enjoyed the silence of Antarctica from our balcony.
Okay, so believe it or not, it's 10 o'clock at night. We're moving silently through the water here.